This is the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Goal Boys Network. Here's your host, Will Hill.
Welcome to the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Goal Boys. Coming up, Aaron Schatz of FTN. We will do a little NFL preview. His almanac guide is out, so he always has extensive notes, extensive research on all of these teams, just hard-hitting data. So he's as good as anyone to talk to get ready for the season. Excited to talk to Aaron. And he's an award voter, so maybe we'll talk about some of these awards as we preview the season. But we'll start with baseball. And I know we spent a lot of time on him on this podcast, but we're going to keep spending time on him. Let's talk the Titanic, the New York Yankees, the sinking ship that is the embarrassment that is the New York Yankees, who were 28 games over 500 on July 14th and now have turned into not just a team in a slump or a mediocre team. They are legitimately a bad baseball team right now. Cole gets bombed out of the building Wednesday night. They can't hit. The lineup they put out there Tuesday is just it's embarrassing as it gets. The fact that you're in a league, first of all, you have unlimited money. Unlimited money. They're worth $7.5 billion. It's a league with no salary cap. I mean, you go to Yankee Stadium, it's basically $50 to go to the bathroom. They print money. And with no salary cap, the fact that you can have Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, and still have a bad lineup is an indictment on everybody. Ownership for the years of not spending and not procuring the talent. GM for not finding better talent. The coaching staff, management, development for not developing the talent. Guys like Gleyber Torres who have just fallen off a cliff, who are not that old. LeMahieu's fallen off a cliff. That's not development. That's just, hey, he's gotten old. I mean, Rizzo gave him nothing before he got hurt. I know they're missing Stanton, but hey, everybody's got an injury or two. The lineup they put up on Tuesday night, Judge and Soto must have thought they were in the minors rehabbing and playing around a bunch of minors. I mean, Johnny Jones and Wells hitting fourth. Guys you never heard of. This is the New York Yankees. This is just such a ridiculous lack of confidence from everybody, from the top down. And here they are now. Baltimore struggling too, so they're not out of the division. They are still somehow only 3 games back in the loss column because, like I said, Baltimore has struggled. They lost the first 2 in Miami and almost blew a 6-0 lead on Thursday. Had to rally, or not rally, but winning in extra innings. Boston still 6 back in the loss column. They've played poorly. They lost 5 out of 6. So all the love we gave to Boston, they've quickly gone from 11 under to 7 under. They lost the first 3 to LA, or all 3 to LA. They got swept, and they lost 2 out of 3 in Colorado, including 20-5 on Wednesday. So not out of it. If you're the Yankees, you're only 3.5 back, 3 in the loss column. But how are you winning any games? And they go to Boston this weekend for what is a big series for both teams. As if you're Boston, you want to get on track and you're afraid of falling out of it and losing a spot altogether. And if you're the Yankees, you're not that clear of a wild card spot either. You're no lock to make the playoffs because Boston is 3 back in the loss column of the Yankees. Boston's the last team out right now, a game behind Kansas City, tied in the loss column. So Kansas City's 56-47, 9 over. Boston played a couple fewer games, 54-47. So same amount of losses, 2 fewer wins. Yankees 16-44. Yankees are only 3 clear of a playoff spot. And if this continues, and why wouldn't it continue? The pitching's been bad. Cole's, who I didn't even mention yet, until now, 5.3 ERA. And I know, hey, he's coming off an injury. Started to look like Cole here and there. Hey, you're back. You're back. This is now a handful of starts. He's been back for a month or so, more than that, a couple months. It's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. Cortez has been awful lately. I mean, just go down the line. There is blame to go everywhere. The players and really the people that put this team together. And if this doesn't get back on track, if they somehow, if they miss the playoffs, you have to get rid of Cashman. You have to get rid of Boone. Even the neutered Hal Steinbrenner, who just keeps everybody around. And as long as the ballpark's happy, he doesn't really care what the results are. As long as you're coming to the ballpark, he doesn't care if he wins or loses. He just wants your money. And fans are stupid enough to show up and give it to him. I would think even missing the playoffs, I would think they have to just get a whole new regime, Cashman, Boone. But who knows? You never know. And even if they lost in like the wild card round, I think anything short of like an ALCS appearance, I think you just have to clean house. But again, we've been saying that for a while with the Yankees, and it just never seems to happen. Just a joke, just an absolute embarrassment. There's no other word. It's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment. All the guys they could have signed to in past years, and I've said it 100 times, I don't care. I'll say it 100 more. Bryce Harper and Corey Seager, left-handed, top of the league, elite talent. Guys in their prime. I know Seager gets hurt a lot, but he is a monster hitter. Harper would have been perfect for New York. Monster hitter. These guys do nothing but hit big home runs and playoffs, World Series. How'd Corey Seager look last year in October, winning World Series MVP? How has Bryce Harper looked in past postseasons, hitting big home run left and right? Manny Machado, Freddie Freeman, all of these guys that you could have added to help improve the talent base. Well, no, we don't need Corey Seager. We have Anthony Volpe coming up. Okay, I mean, give me a break. Just what a joke. What a joke. And I really don't know if they're going to make, I don't think they're winning division. I really don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. The team stinks right now. Team absolutely stinks. I know, all right, get Stanton back pretty soon. And I thought they actually have a little resurgence second half. You get Stanton back, you get Schmidt back, a couple trades. They better make those trades soon, and they better get Stanton back soon. It sounds like Dominguez could be back relatively quickly too. They need something. They need an infusion of talent because this team is absolutely dead right now. Absolutely dead. And I would not pencil them into the playoffs. I really wouldn't. So big series in Fenway. Then they go to Philly. So, hey, it doesn't get any easier. You better, I mean, Philly's not going to take it easy on you just because you're new to the Red Sox aren't going to take it easy on you. I know they're struggling, but boy, if they ever got swept this weekend or lost 2 out of 3, I mean, there's just there's no end in sight unless you start to make multiple trades and just bring in some players, which they haven't done. We're still a little while from the deadline, a few days. I mean, what are you waiting for? This team just can't win right now. They are so bad. So that's the Yankees. The rest of baseball, speaking of teams that are struggling, the Mariners once had a 10-game lead. They have lost 8 out of 9. They are now 53 and 51. The Mariners are there, and Houston hasn't played great, but they're 2 back in the loss of Houston. Houston's going to win that division, I would think. I'd put Texas. I'd give Texas a better chance of winning that division as opposed to Seattle. And Texas is only 1 back on the loss column as I'm recording this. They're playing the White Sox. Texas is only 2 games under 500, so Texas might be a team to watch in the wild card. As far as the rest of baseball, I mentioned Seattle playing terribly. Cleveland only up 4 in the loss column as I'm recording this. And as this game gone final here, well, the Cleveland-Detroit, they have not played well. So, yes, Cleveland ends up losing 3 games to none. So, it's 4 in the loss column. They're only 4.5 up on Minnesota. Minnesota is within striking distance. So, they are, I mean, that's a team that has dominated the division and dominated the first couple months of the season. You look up, they're only 4 up in the loss, 6 up in the loss on Kansas City. Philly's going to run and hide in the East. Braves have all sorts of injuries. Mets now 5 over. Mets have a very good chance to get in the playoffs. That's a good team. That's the other thing about these Mets-Yankee series. That wasn't a fluke. Mets have beat them all 4 times. That's not a fluke. Right now, I know it's crazy, and it really is crazy to say, crazy to think when you think about where these teams started and where these teams were. I don't know, middle of June, early June, where Yankees were the best team in baseball, and the Mets were a bottom, I don't know, 5 or 10 worst team in baseball, probably bottom 5 worst team in baseball. Mets are the better team right now. That was not a fluke. The Mets have a good lineup. You line up Nimmo and Alonso and Alvarez and just all of the McNeil's had a resurgence. That's a good lineup. It really is a good lineup. JD Martinez is a professional bat. Lindor has played tremendously after a bad start. Mets are the better team right now, which is insane. Milwaukee's still clinging to a 6-game lead in the loss over St. Louis. Pittsburgh lurking. I think Pittsburgh has a very decent chance to be one of the wild cards as well. With Skeens, with Keller. Not sure when they're getting Jones back, but that's not a bad team. They would be fun in the playoffs. They'd be dangerous in the playoffs with that pitching. If you could line up Skeens in game 1 and Skeens, it's just awesome. Skeens, Keller, and Jones, my goodness. Play a little house money season. That would be a lot of fun. I'm rooting for that. Dodgers are going to win the West. So that's the baseball. Yankees minus 120 on Friday night against Boston in Boston. Cortez has been awful. I wouldn't trust him in this spot at all. But Bello's going for, I never know if it's Bello or Bayo. I always forget what it's called, how it's pronounced. He's been bad too, 5-something ERA. Pitcher props aren't up yet. If you get like a 5.5 on Cortez, I'd look under. I mean, he just doesn't pitch as well on the road. If I was going to bet anything, I'd honestly just take the plus money, slight plus money with the Red Sox. I don't know how you could bet this Yankee team, especially with Cortez on the road, and look toward Cortez under strikeouts. The Judge walk prop that I talked about, it finally died on Monday. Well, it's been reinvigorated. It's starting to open like minus 260 at some books for him to draw a walk, just because you look at the rest of the lineup. Why would they pitch to him? So it's funny. They corrected that one pretty quickly, where it was, or not even pretty quickly, but pretty dramatically, where for a while it was even money or slightly plus money for a good week or two stretch. And then somebody finally realized, hey, this guy walks every day. And then they moved it. It was the Monday into Tuesday. And it was funny. Monday was the day he walked. Then Tuesday, I looked up and the line was like minus 265. And that was the day he walked, I think, 3 times. And then he made it out later in the 9th inning when he had a chance to get a winning hit. So Maybe a good price on Durant on Judge to walk. That one's not up yet. I mean, you could bet the first at bat walk is like plus 450. That's not terrible because again, why would you pitch to him? Austin Wells is hitting cleanup. I don't care what the situation. Men on base, walk him. Don't let him hurt you. Two out, nobody on, walk him. Don't let him hurt you. Pretty much every situation, unless it's bases loaded and you're never going to walk in a run, even though it's probably not the worst idea considering what's around him. It's never a bad idea to walk Judge in this lineup. And I wonder if they continue to slide as great as Judge is this going to cost him MVP? I don't know. I wouldn't rule that out either, but it is not going well for the Yankees. Everyone involved with that team should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. It's a complete embarrassment, starting with the owner, who's just a clown. It should just sell the team if he's not serious about winning. I know that you'll get the payroll, it's up there, but if you look at the money they make versus the money they spend, nobody pockets a bigger percentage of the revenue than the Yankees. That's just a fact. They make so much money, they take in so much money, and they spend enough. They have a high payroll, and they should, in all fairness, for the payroll, they should have a better team and a more balanced team. But there's just been too much talent in past years that has been available that they didn't sign, and is really, it's probably cost them a World Series, at least an appearance, if not a championship. Like they had Harper on one of these teams the last 5 or 6 years. They probably beat Houston one of those years, and maybe, who knows, go on to win the World Series. They've been very close a few times. Or if you add Seager to them the past couple of years, there have been times, look, they were in the ALCS a couple of years ago. You had Corey Seager to that team, or Harper to that team, or Freeman, or one or two of those three guys. I remember they didn't sign Freeman. Well, we got Rizzo. Well, Rizzo's a discount store version of Freeman. And I know people say, oh, Rizzo's a good clubhouse guy, and Rizzo's a good guy. Rizzo's not as good as Freeman. Rizzo's washed up, and now you wish you had Freddie Freeman. This team would look different with Freddie Freeman. So it's the owner's fault. It's the owner's fault, and people should stop going to the ballpark, because if you're going to the ballpark and enabling this nonsense, you're part of the problem too, because just don't show up. They're not spending their money. You shouldn't spend yours, and this is just ridiculous how Hal Steinbrenner has run this team into the ground. But enough baseball. Let's talk some football there in Shots. That is next. This Shoulda Bet More podcast. All right, we are back. Shoulda Bet More. Aaron Schatz is one of the great football minds we have. You can catch him at FTN, the Football Almanac, all of that. And he joins us now. Aaron, good to see you. Thanks for coming on. Does it feel like football is a week or so away in terms of the preseason?
Yes, because my book is done. We do all this work, and when the book is done, it's time for training camp. And so I feel very much like training camp is here.
Yes, and it is a must read. I encourage everyone to go check it out. Let me ask you this to start. Is there anything that surprised you doing your research, doing your projections that jumped out to you?
Well, I mean, our projections will surprise other people. They don't surprise me as much because I know where teams ranked last year. So I sort of know what the expectations are. The one piece of research that sort of surprised me is in the Atlanta chapter, Scott Spratt looked at how well teams draft the order of players compared to how good players actually end up being in the NFL. Right? In other words, is how much can you expect that the quarterback you take is going to be better than the next quarterback off the board compared to a tight end versus the next tight end off the board, or a defensive tackle versus the next defensive tackle off the board? Basically, in the context of, Atlanta said that Michael Penix was the number 2 quarterback on their board. What's the likelihood that he's not, that he's the number 4 quarterback? Because that's how he went in the draft. And he found that, believe it or not, quarterback is the position on offense that is drafted the most correctly in terms of the order of players.
Wow.
The only position that was more value compared to a random distribution was defensive tackle.
Interesting.
So for all we talk about how hard it is to predict and draft quarterbacks, we may be better at drafting quarterbacks than we are at most other positions. It's just, it looks like it's more random because the position is so important and because there's no backup, right? I mean, no team has a quarterback who plays 25% of the snaps because he wasn't as good as his draft position, but there are plenty of defensive tackles who are still in the league, playing 25% of the snaps because they weren't as good as their draft position, right? So,
yeah, and like when Purdy's having a good game, I mean, we're going to hear 10 different times throughout the broadcast that he was the the last pick in the draft. You're not going to hear the same thing about a defensive tackle. So that's interesting. Is there a team you don't have a good feel for? Is there one team where you're like, man, I could see this team going either way, you just don't have a good grasp one way or another? Because I have a couple.
There are a lot of teams like that. Primarily, they are, in my mind, the teams with the rookie quarterbacks, and I'll include Indianapolis because Anthony Richardson is effectively a rookie because he only played a couple of games last year. I'm not thinking of Minnesota and New England because I expect Minnesota and New England to play their veterans for at least half the year. And I'm not expecting Denver because I don't see Bo Nix having a great rookie season. But with Washington, Chicago, and Indianapolis, I feel like one of those teams is going to really surprise us and be pretty good. But I don't know which one of those teams it is. And we don't know. We just don't know because look at last year. Look at CJ Stroud performing as one of the best rookie quarterbacks of all time. And Bryce Young is one of the worst. Even though Young went before Stroud in the draft, nobody would have predicted that.
Yeah, I think the team for me is Philly, where I've heard smart people make compelling cases. Hey, throughout the second half of last year, tough schedule, it caught up with them. Very forgiving of that last 8 or so games, and it makes sense. And then I've heard other people say, hey, are we dismissing Dallas a little too quickly? Philly, that was a brutal end to the season. Are they really as improved as we think? So to me, Philly, like I wouldn't be surprised if they won 7. I wouldn't be surprised if they won 13. To me, Philly, I think is really, really confusing going.
Yeah, we're low on Philly compared to the market, and their schedule was not hard in the second half last year. That's not why they declined. They just fell apart, and they weren't as good as their record in the first half of the year either. And I know that when you look at their roster, it feels like it's one of the best rosters in the league, but the sum has not been as good as the parts.
Yeah, and Hurts, it's just, I think the jury is still out. There were questions coming out of college. He played well. He silenced them. Now I'm not sure. So they're one. Let me ask you about another team that's very polarizing. I think maybe the most interesting team in the league, the Jets. Just projections, gut instinct, take it whatever direction you want to go.
I feel like you cannot project a great offense with a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury. You can expect that their offense, even if Rodgers plays at the level he played at his last year in Green Bay, that is much better than their offense was last year. And their defense projects to be very good once again and has stars at every level of the defense. So I like the Jets. Now, here's the biggest problem that the Jets have. I mean, even if their offense is better than I'm expecting, we have 8 of the top 12 teams as AFC teams by projected DVOA. If we're right about all 8, one of them still has to miss the playoffs. And that's if none of the other 8 teams in the conference surprise us.
Yeah, and we talked about going into last year, the AFC's loaded, the AFC's so good, which it was. But then Rodgers gets hurt, Herbert gets hurt, Burrow gets hurt, and it was still a good conference. If all these guys stay healthy, you're going to be looking at, like you said, 1 or 2 really good teams that don't make the playoffs. Man, if you don't have a quarterback in that conference, good luck.
We have San Francisco number 1 in projected DVOA. The next 5 teams are AFC teams.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. Anybody you think is just in general overrated, underrated going into the year? And I remember you were on 2 years ago, speaking of Philly, and I asked you for a kind of a sleeper team, same sort of question, and you picked Philly. I think it's like 40-1, which is crazy to think about now. And they end up being whatever, a play away from winning the Super Bowl. Is there a team like that? Anybody you think's overrated, underrated, take whatever direction you want.
Not teams that are going to be in Super Bowl contention, but there are 2 teams I feel are very underrated. One is the New Orleans Saints. Because they are boring and dull, people think that they are bad. But they are not bad. They are very, very average. And they have a very easy schedule. They are an average team with an easy schedule, and the number in Vegas is 7.5. That's the kind of number you give a bad team with an easy schedule, but they're not bad. They were like 16th or something in DVOA last year. They're a very average team that also, by the way, just added an offensive coordinator from the Shanahan system in Clint Kubiak. So I really like New Orleans to win the NFC South. The other one is New England, where the offense will be bad, but probably not as bad as last year. And the defense should be very good. The Patriots were 9th in defensive DVOA last year, despite being 30th in takeaways per drive. That is going to regress positively this year. They are going to have more takeaways, and they are getting back their best pass rusher and 2 of their 3 best cornerbacks, who all missed most of the season last year. And they have the lowest over-under number in the market at 4.5. That number is just too low. The odds that the Patriots are going to win 5 or 6, I mean, we expect them to win 7.
Wow.
But I mean, the chances of them winning 5 or 6 are really good. That number is super low considering how good this defense should be, unless the loss of Belichick just completely rips this defense apart. The defense will be good enough for this team to win 5 games.
A couple more teams that I think are interesting. Houston, obviously really talented team, offensive rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year. But you look at the quarterbacks they beat last year. It's a lot of Bryce Young and Minshew a couple times, and Tannehill and Levis. Step up this year. Expectations this year. Which way do you lean here with the Texans?
Love Houston this year. Added talent, offense and defense. Added talent. I don't think the AFC South is as strong as other people seem to think. I really like Houston at 1,600 to win the Super Bowl as a nice value, even though they're not my Super Bowl favorite.
Did you make a Super Bowl prediction?
I'm going with San Francisco and Baltimore.
Oh, okay.
Those two teams, those were the best 2 teams in the league during last year's regular season, so far ahead of the rest of the league that even with the talent that Baltimore has lost, and yes, I am worried about the offensive line and the loss of Mike McDonald, I still think they project slightly ahead of Kansas City as the best team in the conference, and picking Kansas City again is just not fun.
No, absolutely. How about the Chargers? Do you just look at it and think, hey, they've got a coach, they got a quarterback, that's a lot of it right there, and don't overthink it? Or is the rest of the roster just not good enough? Where are you at here with LA?
Rest of the roster is just not good enough. That is clearly a rebuilding team. The receivers are bad. The defense has some not so good parts and some older parts, and that team is rebuilding. And I like Harbaugh, but I don't think Harbaugh can turn that whole team into his vision within 1 year.
Yeah, they're going to be an interesting team to watch for sure because yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he'll bring a toughness to the team. It's just like you said, that it might take more than a year. So a little bit like Michigan, it didn't happen overnight. He kept chasing Ohio State, and eventually he caught him.
The Chargers are the free sample chapter of the Almanac. If you go to ftnfantasy.com/almanac, you can read the Chargers chapter. And I will admit, Mike Tanier, who wrote that chapter, has somewhat controversial views on Justin Herbert. He is not as high on Justin Herbert as everybody else. So I really recommend that you read it, not only to get a sense of what our almanac is about, but to read a sort of counter take on Justin Herbert.
So if you like the Patriots, a lot of people think, hey, if you ask them who's the worst team in the league, they'll say the Patriots. If that's not them for you, which it sounds like it's not, obviously, who is the worst team in the league?
I think the Giants are the worst team in the league. And the Giants may not end up the worst team in the league because their range of possibilities is not as strong as some of other teams. But the thing about the Giants is they are bad and they don't have any hope. Daniel Jones at quarterback. I mean, some people were talking on Twitter, a few analytics people I know, about, is Daniel Jones underrated? Is he possibly like the 20th best quarterback in the game? Okay, sure. Maybe he's like the 20th best quarterback in the game with a star rookie wide receiver and not much else to work with on offense, and a good left tackle. A good left tackle and a star rookie wide receiver and not much else to work with on offense, and all kinds of questions in the secondary, even if there are some good players in the defensive front. That just doesn't look like a team that has hope. Whereas we have Washington lower, we have Chicago much lower than the market. But those teams have hope because if those quarterbacks break out, those teams will be good.
Do you think the Bills missed their window?
No, the window is a little more closed than it was last year, but they're still, they're still in the mix. But they have the hardest schedule in the league, and that's tough.
How about the Bears? They're going to get a little bump here, I'm sure, on Hard Knocks. Everyone's going to fall in love with the story, and that's always how it goes. Creeping up to, I had Femi Abebefe on the podcast the other day. He said there's some 9s out there for over-under wins. That seems excessive. Oh, you're saying under?
Yeah, the fact is that defense, people believe that second half defensive improvement carries over to the next year, but it doesn't. It doesn't. We want to believe it. It's counterintuitive, but it doesn't. And you just don't know what Williams is going to be. That defense depended so much on takeaways. They were 4th in the league in takeaways per drive. Again, that will regress. You don't know what Williams is going to be. Could the Bears win more than 9 games? Sure. Is it likely? No, I think it's much more likely that they win 7.
Any awards jump out to you? MVP? Anyone you think is undervalued? You look at the numbers. Everything looks pretty properly priced. It's the guys you'd expect. I know some people have made a case. Goff, when he was like 30, 35 to 1, might be an interesting one just because it's so correlated to team record. But anything for MVP or any of these other awards that caught your eye?
I have not looked at the odds for the awards, but I'll say this, and I'll say this, just people understand that I am one of the voters. It would be tough to vote for Goff unless his stats were so far ahead of the rest of the league. We just know how much Goff, Tua, and Purdy are helped by their teammates and their systems. And it would be, if someone else was close to him, someone like Prescott or Allen or Mahomes, it would be pretty tough to vote for Goff. And I doubt I'm the only person who thinks that way.
Yeah, that's those are good comparisons. Purdy, Tua, and Goff. I think you can put them all in the same bucket for the reasons you mentioned. Any other outlying opinions you feel like you have? Anything you think that's goes against the grain?
I think I'm a little higher on Cleveland than the market, a little higher on Seattle than the market, a little lower on Atlanta. That's part of the New Orleans thing, is that I'm lower on Atlanta. We have them projected with the worst defensive projection.
Wow.
In the league. And again, people will find all these projections along with all these stats from last year and a bunch of write-ups on every team. FTNfantasy.com/almanac, or search for the FTN Football Almanac on Amazon.
Aaron, I think we covered it. I appreciate the time. FTN and the Almanac, anything else to plug before we get you out of here?
I've got some new stuff on ESPN Plus, our top prospects list of under the radar second and third year prospects. If people want to go check that out, requires an ESPN Plus subscription, but you'll also find that in the Almanac. So just more reason to buy the Almanac.
Aaron, I appreciate the time. Always fun catching up. Good job on the Almanac as always. I encourage people to read it. It will help you betting. It will help your knowledge of football. So Aaron, good to see you, man. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Talk to you sometime during the season.
All right, that'll do it. Thank you to Aaron Schatz. We will be back Monday. Rate, review, subscribe. See you Monday.